Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the committees who have been here for a marathon hearing, there's been a lot of talk about how many of these we've had. This is my first one, and I have been very appreciative about what I've heard from the role that each of you all have played in uncovering what is a truly horrific episode of censorship I saw as a private citizen. Unfortunately, I was not here to help uncover and to fight back against the censorship over the last 3 to 5 years. But nonetheless, I am deeply grateful to this committee and to all of you for your past and continued efforts to protect the First Amendment. I must say that I'm somewhat astounded that there has not been one colleague on the other side of the aisle that has brought themselves to acknowledge, much less criticize, the very obvious and blatant efforts of the Biden administration to suppress information in a very, very problematic anti-First Amendment, and I would argue illegal way. And part of this has been admitted by those who were censored. It's been admitted by those who are in the private industry who were bullied into removing content. But I want to talk more about what's going on right now. Mr. Shellenberger, I want to start with you. You mentioned that you are still within the crosshairs of the censorship industrial complex, and it's a wide variety of actors, agency, contractors, private companies, even universities and so forth. What is the end goal of this censorship that we're seeing, not just here in the United States, but also in places like Brazil where you're being investigated?
Yeah, thank you. Well, yeah, thank you for asking that question. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear a lot of concerns about who gets to be in the limited space in the Defense Department. By the way, Huffington Post is a left-wing magazine that got in, and Rupa works for a centrist magazine that's in there. It's just not a censorship issue or changing the website. That's pretty ridiculous. I'm actually under criminal investigation in Brazil for expressing true facts on X. That's actually happening right now. Similarly, we see in Europe, very serious penalties for people that supposedly commit the act of misinformation. And then in Canada, there's actually life imprisonment as a potential punishment for
what's the end of these laws and these efforts? Is it total political power? Is it just the easy eradication of dissent? What is the goal?
Yeah, I mean, total information control is definitely the goal. They want to control the information and also shape how people understand it. That's why they talk about narrative control. And then the other part of it is they want to scare people. They just want people to be afraid to say things online.
So that they can remain in power, or.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see some of it just in the vanity of politicians demanding that posts about themselves be taken down, but obviously that's important for their political careers. And that's why in Brazil they've actually banned whole politicians from being online.
And in your estimation, we've obviously heard about information that has been taken down and forcefully removed, but the narrative control also, it brings to mind narratives that are written and pushed into the public sphere. And one thing that's of concern to me is whether it was the Russian collusion narrative, the Russian dossier, the Biden laptop scandal trying to discredit what seemed to be a very obvious, verified piece of evidence, questioning Biden's role in enriching himself, that was made out of bounds. Yep. Questions about the vaccine, we all are familiar with those, the vaccine's effectiveness, the effect of the vaccine. Looking at the news media, is there a part of this that I would submit to you where the narrative is pushed into various outlets to further the censor's objectives?
Well, yeah, I mean, you see it right now, right? Everybody's saying constitutional crisis. If you just Google that, it's like all over. Everybody repeats themselves in the mainstream news media. But look, I mean, we're in a new world now. We have more platforms that are open. I think it's much harder to get away with lying, as the New York Times did last night when it claimed that there was no evidence of fraud. Yep. For Musk. So I do think it's a new environment, but that's why you have to keep the government from putting pressure on these social media platforms so they can continue to let the conversation.
And just very briefly, is what's happening now with Elon Musk, who is highlighting the waste, fraud, and abuse of USAID and other expenditures, and what happened under the Biden-Harris administration with their censorship efforts, are those two aligned? Are they in any way synonymous with one another?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, in terms of things not changing, when we were here 2 years ago, Elon Musk was the big, the devil because he was allowing free speech to proliferate on on what was then Twitter, and you hear it today. I mean, we heard a lot of people get up today and talk about how they support free speech, but we have to stop all the racism and hate online. Well, that's a call for censorship. I mean, let's just be perfectly clear. If you're calling for censorship of hatred and racism or anti-Semitism online, you're calling for censorship, and that is completely anathema to the American tradition, to our Supreme Court rulings, to Brandenburg and its reinforcement in Skokie. So, look, we've had a lot of technological revolutions with different media sources. We had since 1776, 1789, we've had the telegraph, we've had radio, we've had television, now we have the internet. Somehow we've managed to keep our tradition of freedom of speech and the First Amendment alive despite those technological revolutions, after which every single time somebody was saying that, oh, everything has changed and we have to now amend or qualify the First Amendment.
And may I close with just one question to you, sir? How is AI going to make it easier or more difficult to apply censorship for political gain? Either or, yeah.
AI would allow these companies to detect narratives and enforce all of these strictures with much greater speed than we saw in the Twitter files. And the process that they're going through with the DSA, which right now requires huge armies of people, or what they call trusted flaggers, to go through information personally, they can do that with AI with almost no investment at all. And that's the terrifying part.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I would ask unanimous consent to enter into